The Honda Ny1 is a slightly funky name, but it is the manufacturer's first electric SUV. It's also the second fully electric vehicle, of course following on from the compact Honda E. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, prices start from £45,000. That's for the elegance trim. If, however, you go for the advanced trim, which is on review, it costs you £47,200. That is, of course, without adding any additional options. Now, in this review, we'll be comparing and contrasting to some of the alternatives out there on the market and to see if this electric SUV is actually worth its price tag. So to kick things off, we have to talk about its electric range, because here, unlike the Honda E, it has a much larger battery pack, 68.8 kilowatt hour to be more specific. And the manufacturer claims you'll get 256 miles, at least on the WLTP test cycle. Now, from my own mixed driving test, I actually netted between 180 to 200 miles, which isn't exactly all that good for a vehicle of its price. Indeed, if you look at some of its competitors and the mileage leaderboard, you'll quickly realize that the Ny1 actually cannot fare well with some of its electric SUV counterparts. So this is actually quite disappointing, because Honda had really the opportunity to bring out a vehicle that had an extended range, but that's not quite the case, at least not from my own test and in terms of my own mixed driving conditions. Now, of course, you have got the ability to recoup energy back into the battery pack and be as efficient as possible. And in order to do this, there is a degree of regenerative braking. Now, when you're on the move, you've got the flappy paddle. So going on the left flappy paddle, you might see on the instrument cluster that there are some arrows. So here, if I start lifting off the accelerator pedal, it starts decelerating. Of course, I can reduce the effect by going down on the arrows and also holding down on the right side flappy paddle to completely disable it. In other words, initiate a coast. It is a shame here that we do not have a one pedal drive, which would have been a great addition yet again in this modern day age for an electric SUV to have that one pedal drive. Why would you care about it and why would you need it? Well, simply because it makes those inner city commutes a little less cumbersome, because when you lift off the accelerator pedal, it can come to a complete standstill. That's not the case with the Ny1, and even on its harshest regenerative braking mode, you'll still have to resort to using the physical brake pedal. Now, of course, if you come to a standstill, you can plug it in. And here you have got the charge ports that are located at the front of the vehicle, very much like the Honda E. And here you'll find a CCS and a Type 2 port. Now, the CCS port is disappointingly limited to 78 kilowatts. I say that because a lot of its competitors offer north of 100 kilowatts and therefore allowing a much faster charge. In this respect, it means that Honda can claim a 10 to 80% charge in roughly 45 minutes, whereas most of its competitors can offer this in sub 30 minutes. Now, if you're not going to be plugging in to a DC charge point, and therefore let's say an AC charge point, say at home, then you'll be pleased to know that the vehicle does come fitted with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. So therefore, via an 11 kilowatt wall box, you'll be able to go from 10 to 80% in 6 hours. If you're going to be connecting over a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, expect this figure to be a lot higher, at roughly 9 to potentially 10 hours. And of course, if you're plugging it via a regular 3-pin input, it's going to take much longer. So past all of this, how is the vehicle to drive? Well, first off, I do have to talk about performance. And here you have got a front-mounted electric motor, which combines with its 68.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack to dispatch 150 kilowatts of power, or 201 horsepower, and 310 newton meters of torque. I actually had this tested via Race Logic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 6.99 seconds, 50 to 70 miles an hour in 3.94 seconds, and a G-force of 0.52. As for its top speed, it's limited to 99 miles an hour. Now, it's not exactly going to set your world alight, but that should certainly suffice for the target market. What will be of disappointment, however, is to know that this vehicle does very much suffer from a lot of torque steer. In other words, front wheel spinning. And this is very much occurrent when you're going to be putting your foot down to the metal when you're exiting a bend, or for example, if you're on a little bit of a wet tarmac and you're just going to be going from a standstill and you're going to be taking, let's say, a corner, you will notice that the vehicle really struggles for traction. Something I noted in some of its competitors, for example, the Hyundai Kona Electric or some of the other front-wheel drive vehicles. Given that the Honda E was a rear-wheel drive vehicle, it is very surprising to say the least that the Ny1 does not have a rear-wheel drive configuration. And now this leads me on to my next point, and that comes to the driver's feel. Unfortunately here, unlike its smaller sibling, the Honda E, the Ny1 just feels a bit more disjointed. You've got less connection with the front axle, and you have got far less confidence when you're cornering, specifically on those winding country routes. And again, that is due to the fact that you have got a front-wheel drive configuration. It would have been great to see Honda integrate a rear-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive configuration, not only to compete with some of its competitors, but potentially also to appeal to some of the Honda customers. Equally, its suspension system is a little bit of a letdown. The same sort of comments were said about one of its competitors, the Smart #1, and it isn't exactly as stiff as the likes of the MG ZS EV, but nor is it as comfortable as the likes of the VW ID4 or ID5, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 or Kona Electric, the Kia e-Niro or the Niro EV, or let alone the Kia EV6, and the likes of the Subaru Solterra or the Toyota BZ4X, all of which just feel a lot more comfortable, let alone those that actually provide a more advanced system such as the Citroen EC4 and the EC4X, which simply allow you to glide over speed bumps, potholes and anomalies. Effectively, what I'm trying to say over here and trying to convey is the fact that the Honda Ny1 isn't exactly the most comfortable electric SUV, specifically if you're going to be pottering around town. So aside from how it is on the road, what about when it comes to its interior? Well, there is synthetic leather upholstery and a genuine leather steering wheel, which all look and feel the part, although won't exactly stand out in comparison to some of its more expensive rivals. Now, what will differ is in terms of its infotainment system. It's a vertical 15.1-inch display that's split into 3 separate parts. Before you ask, no, there is no means of actually combining them, at least not at the time of filming. Indeed, over here at the top, you have got your sat-nav and your clock. Below it, you have got the infotainment system, which is similar to what you'd find on other Honda vehicles. And then below it, you have got the dedicated climate controls. Now, it's really nice to see that you've actually got a pretty large area for your climate controls, but it would have been even better appreciated if there were physical controls like you'd find on the HR-V. It's a shame over here that the manufacturer has gone down the digital route. Now, in terms of these 3 separate blocks, I'm not too fond of them, because over here the top 2 blocks would have been great if they could have been combined. For example, getting an even larger display for your sat-nav, or for example, simply to see your media playback would have been a little bit more appreciated, rather than them being actually split into separate parts where certain parts will actually be left a bit redundant. Now, nonetheless, the system itself supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay over a wired connection. However, CarPlay is also supported wirelessly. Now, as for the secondary 10.25-inch display, in form of the instrument cluster of course, it provides you all the key driving information and the safety systems that are in operation. It would have been great to see a further degree of customization, but nonetheless I've got no real complaints. However, it would have been great to see a head-up display, be it featured as standard in the advanced trim or available as an option to customers, but alas, that's not the case. Now, speaking of your options, there's no Bose audio system in the advanced trim, like you'd find on other Honda vehicles, which is actually quite baffling to say the least. Furthermore, if you do actually look at the spec sheet, you'll notice that both the Elegance and the advanced trims list 6 speakers only. However, if you do have a keen eye, you will notice that the advanced trim actually adds a subwoofer in the boot. So therefore, it actually results to 7 speakers in the advanced trim, or a premium audio system, at least according to the manufacturer, and 6 speakers in the Elegance trim. It seems to be I am the first person in the world, or at least in the UK, to have pointed it out to the manufacturer, and hopefully this will be rectified in future spec sheets. Nonetheless, over here, in terms of the audio system in the advanced trim, I was actually left a little bit disheartened. It's nowhere near as good as the Bose audio system that is found on the likes of the HR-V or, for example, the Civic, and in this respect, it is quite a shame that the manufacturer has dropped Bose altogether. Very much on that point, the eNY1 does away with the magic seats. Now for those who are unaware, the likes of the Honda HR-V or the Jazz effectively had the ability to have their rear seats completely lifted up, and therefore giving you a larger storage area at the rear of the cabin. Now this is completely omitted altogether in the eNY1 and therefore doesn't make it stand out in comparison to some of its competitors. I do appreciate this might not be a unique selling point for a lot of consumers, but for those people who did appreciate it, unfortunately it is not present. Now this does perfectly bring me onto storage within the cabin, and despite the omission of said feature, the rear cup holders still have that floppy design. I'm not really sure as to why Honda has not optimized this and therefore doesn't exactly feel all that premium. However, at the rear you still have plenty of storage compartments, be it at the rear portion of the front seats, the door bins, and a small little area behind the center console. You've also got two USB Type-C ports that provide charge. Speaking of which, at the front of the cabin you've got a wireless smartphone charger which comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, and this resides next to a USB Type-A and Type-C port and also a 12-volt socket. Further down the center console you've got two cup holders, and then you've also got a small little area found within the center armrest, which will suffice for a small size purse or a wallet. Now of course you have got the glove box and you have got the front door bins, which will accommodate a 500ml bottle alongside some small size valuables. It would have been further appreciated if they were lined in sort of fabric material, because it would have prevented any sort of loose change or keys from rattling around when you are traversing uneven terrain. Of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot, and here it's great to see that you have got that hatchback design. There is also a power tailgate in the advanced trim. Now when it comes to the overall storage capacity, you've got 344 up to 361 litres, and with the seats propped down you've got 1136 litres up to 1176 litres. This is depending on the certain trim level that you'll go for. Now while the overall storage isn't exactly class leading, specifically if you compare it to larger size SUVs, it should certainly suffice for most consumers doing their weekly shops. Furthermore, it's great to see that you've actually got a sizable underfloor compartment, which will be a great place for storing your charging cables, because at the front of the vehicle there is no extra storage compartment, so indeed there is no sort of frunk despite it being a fully electric vehicle. Elsewhere, I would like to point out that you do have a completely flat loading bay, although there are only 60/40 rear split folding seats, and therefore you do not have an integrated ski latch. Moving swiftly on, let's talk about seating comfort, and here it's a non-issue both at the front and rear of the cabin, thanks to the seats being soft and accommodating. Although I should point out that the rear seats are slightly diagonally wedged, very much like other electric SUVs on the market, and means that your thigh or quad muscles might get a little bit tired. Thankfully, however, legroom is being optimized and there is pretty much no transmission tunnel, which is always great to see. Although the same couldn't be quite said about headroom, specifically if you're sat at the rear middle seat, because it's going to be limited even for those people who are just under 6 foot, like myself. Now at the front of the cabin you have got heated 8-way electronic controls for the driver, while the passenger has got manual controls. It is also worth noting that you've got no height adjustments. You do also have a heated steering wheel in the advanced trim and a panoramic glass roof, which is certainly appreciated to draw in some extra light. With that in mind, it perfectly brings me onto its exterior design, and it's very similar to the Honda HR-V, although it looks a bit more refined and in some ways quite cute. At the front you've got a covered grille, because of course it's not required in a fully electric vehicle and therefore gives it a little bit more of that unison type of look. The headlights feed seamlessly with the bonnet, and as for its sidle profile, it would have been great to see body-coloured wheel arches and side skirts, but given that they don't protrude too much from the exterior profile, I've got no real complaints. Furthermore, you've got 18-inch alloys that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range, but should you want different styled 18-inch alloys, you'll have to splash out between £1,420 to £1,460. As for its rear profile, you've got an integrated spoiler, and you'll be able to note that there is a tail light design that stretches the entire width of the vehicle with Honda written across it. Nothing to be overly shouting about, but it's something to note in comparison to other Honda vehicles out there. In terms of your colour options, it comes in black as standard. However, for an additional £650, you can go for a red, grey, white or the pictured blue finish, which I do think is pretty reasonable given that it spruces up the overall design of the vehicle. You have of course got a few different packs that you can add, although they will set you back a pretty penny and don't seem to change all that much in terms of its exterior profile. So aside from its exterior design, what about when it comes to safety? Well, at the time of filming, it hasn't been tested by Euro NCAP, but there is a plethora of driver assistance systems that come featured as standard. You've got adaptive cruise control that actually does work a treat, intelligent speed limiter, traffic sign recognition that does seem to be a little bit hit and miss, lane departure warning, lane keep assist, brake assist, collision mitigation braking system, forward collision warning, leading car departure, road departure mitigation, low speed following, and traffic jam assist. Indeed, it is absolutely featured packed, and these all come featured as standard in both the elegance and the advanced trims, which are absolutely great to see. However, I do wish there was a means of actually disabling the bings and bongs that constantly occur within the vehicle. This was one of my complaints when I also reviewed the Honda CR-V, and it would have been great to actually see this present in the Ny1, but alas, at the time of filming, it is quite cumbersome when you do sit inside the vehicle, as there are constant notifications and warnings that come through the instrument cluster. Past all of that, you have also got a rear camera and front and rear parking sensors that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range. If, however, you want to up the ante, you'll find lateral sensors and a multi-view camera system with parking pilot in the advanced trim. Now, all vehicles have got great visibility at the front, side and at the rear. And it's also good to see that you have a rear wiper, which isn't always present on certain electric SUVs. Elsewhere, you've got an 11.6 meter turning circle, which makes maneuverability of this vehicle actually pretty easy. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict. And quite frankly, the Honda Ny1 doesn't stand out in comparison to its competitors, which is quite a shame. Indeed, over here, it doesn't offer class-leading electric range, driving dynamics or performance, or indeed overall driving comfort due to its suspension setup. The plethora of driver assistance systems, while appreciated, can be quite annoying because you can't exactly fully disable them. And as for the technology within the cabin, it could have been a little bit more optimized. In terms of the rear occupancy space and the boot capacity, for a small-sized electric SUV, it's actually not too bad. However, of course, if you do want better or more space, then you might want to look at some of the larger electric SUVs. Frankly, what I'm trying to say over here is that there's some other alternatives that you should look at, some of which I've reviewed on the down description below for your own consideration. Now, I'll be curious to know what you make of the Honda Ny1 and how you feel it compares to some of the other electric SUVs down in the comment section below. Now, if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.